Hollywood headlines to indie upsets, here's What's Making Waves This Week.
Okay, so Waves This Week is basically a show where we dig into what are kind of the bigger stories of the week. So we had our stories of the week. This is like what is like the big theme that we're taking away from things. And I don't think we can avoid talking about it any longer. It sounds so dry. But at least dry in first pass. But we need to talk about taxes and tax incentives in Hollywood because one of the biggest stories of the week is just LA film and TV production levels plunge from the Hollywood Reporter. Basically looking at quarterly reporting for businesses that serve the film industry in the LA area saw the largest loss in production that they've seen in a long time. The big stats are in the 3-month period from January to March, there were huge losses in every category of production compared to the same period last year, according to a report from Film LA, a nonprofit group that handles film permits for the city and country, issued on Monday. So what they were reporting is that overall shooting in LA decreased over 22% from the same period last year for quarter one. So it's May now, so we've pretty much just wrapped up, give or take a month, the first quarter of the year, and compared to last year, shooting is down in LA by 22%. A lot of people want to say that this is because film tax incentives in California are not supporting the growth of business or the decision to film in the area, that there is a huge movement to move projects elsewhere. And I will dig into that because there's a lot to dig into there. But let me just finish up with this story. So shooting levels in the region, which were exacerbated by reductions in content spent across most studios, last year recorded the lowest figure observed by Film LA since it started tracking data in 2017, excluding 2020. Translate that to say that last year was a terrible year, and this year we're down 22% already. Things are not looking good for Hollywood, LA, and California film productions in general, which takes us to the next story, which was a New York Times piece called "There's a Feeling We're Not in Hollywood Anymore." This is a super deep dive. It's the New York Times, so you have to get through the paywall however you choose to. I'm not condoning, things, but get through the paywall to read the story. I'll go ahead and, find us on YouTube. I will attach the links to most of these stories, the most important of these stories, in the comments section of this live stream. The big piece here is that New York Times is basically reporting on how film and TV productions are very clearly leaving California for other places. They say movies and TV productions are rapidly leaving California to film outside the United States, where labor costs are lower and tax incentives are greater. Industry workers are exasperated. Is that fair? Are you exasperated? Is that exasperation? So they specifically call out a show on Fox that Rob Lowe hosts. It's a game show called The Floor, and they literally fly Rob Lowe, the host, and 100 American contestants thousands of miles across the Atlantic Ocean to a studio in Dublin in order to film it, because even with the cost of the flights and the studio in Dublin, it's still cheaper than doing that same work in California. It is wild. So yeah, it says more financial sense than filming in California. There's a quote from Michael F. Miller Jr., a vice president at the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees who oversees film and television production for the union, has said that roughly 18,000 full-time jobs have evaporated in the past 3 years, primarily in California. Now, the story also says that plenty of production has stayed within the United States, that 38 states have spent more than $25 billion in tax incentives for film and TV, which has led to hubs in states like Georgia, Kentucky's getting up there, Tennessee's getting up there, Nevada's building some culture, Texas is working really hard on a huge tax incentive program. Ted Sarandos. Oh no, that's his name again. He's back. Ted Sarandos, the co-chief executive of Netflix, said in February that the company, which has constructed a filming hub in New Mexico and is building another in New Jersey, would still invest $1 billion over the next 4 years to produce series and films in Mexico. So there's a lot of offshoring happening. There's a quote here. They talked about Aaron Ryder, who was a producer for Arrival and Dumb Money, talking about how significant Hungary, the country of Hungary, has become for filmmaking, saying that he ran into actor Mark Strong at the Four Seasons Hotel in Budapest while he was scouting for a project. He also had run into Jerry Bruckheimer using a treadmill in that hotel's gym. The quote here is, you can walk into the bar in the lobby in the Four Seasons and probably see more colleagues or actors and directors and agents and people you know there than you can in the Four Seasons in LA. Woo! Yeah, this is hefty, right? And it really kind of boils down to tax incentives, and we'll dig into it because there was another story that came out this week about UK taxpayers and tax incentives in the UK and what they're going to and whether or not they are being effective and helpful for people in the industry. But a couple more things on this story. During the wildfires in January, producer Amy Bayer wanted badly to move her upcoming buddy comedy from Vancouver, BC to LA, thinking that it would help her director whose neighborhood had been destroyed and that it would help her city. But when Bayer ran the numbers, she found that it was impossible. To meet the $10 million budget she had, her team would have to cut 10 weeks of work, a third of their shooting schedule. There's a note here that, Governor Gavin Newsom, there are people that think that Gavin Newsom is gasm worthy. Governor Gavin Newsom has pushed to more than double the available funding for the state's tax incentive program. That's still in the works. The New York Times got access to a budget document that showed that the cost of a 7-person grip team for a 30-day shoot in Budapest was going to cost about $59,000. But one person in LA, one grip for the same period of time would cost about $53,000. So that's how much of a huge offset we're seeing, which is driving a ton of people to leave the LA area. It closes out by saying LA now ranks as the 6th best location for filming, according to a survey of studio executives by PodPro, which tracks production trends. Toronto, Britain, Vancouver, Central Europe, and Australia are all considered more desirable, the survey says. So that's a state of what is, right? That is how tough it is right now for film productions in LA and California. Now, let's talk about tax incentives and whether or not they work, which takes us to this story. UK taxpayers contributed 89 million euros to the most expensive movie ever made, which sounds like a complaint. But when you read the story, it's really not. They're talking about how these tax incentive programs are working. And my notes are very heavy on this one. I'm going to have a lot of quotes. So recently filed documents reveal that the HMRC, I'll tell you what that is in a second, gave this upcoming, let me rephrase that. Recently filed documents reveal that the HMRC gave the last Jurassic Park movie 89.1 million euros, believed to be the largest payment for a film since the UK government incentive scheme began in 2007. Now, the HMRC is formerly Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, which is effectively tax program in in the UK. It gives studios a reimbursement of up to 25.5% of the sum they spent on making a movie in the UK, provided that at least 10% of that film's total cost is incurred in the UK. They kind of like did a deep dive into this program and whether or not it's working. Dominion was one of the most expensive movies of all time, with total costs of 453.6 million euros, overtaking the previous top spender at 452 million euros, which was for the making of Star Wars: The Force Awakens in 2015. The prequel to it, 2018's Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom, banked a further 70.7 million euros from this tax scheme, bringing the total to 159.8 million euros for the two. So the 159, almost 160 million euros in tax incentive given to Universal Studios for the creation, Universal, for the creation of those two movies, and the fact that they filmed it in the UK. Those movies combined for a profit of 3.9 billion euros, which is about $5.2 billion during that time, right? So they made $5.2 billion and still received almost $200 million in tax incentives for the fact that they filmed in the UK. Now, what does that do for the area? Like, what is the benefit to the UK for those tax incentives? One is the latest, the latest data from the British Film Institute, the BFI, shows that in 2019, now this data is a little bit old, we can assume that this is different, but similar, that for every euro of reimbursement handed to studios, they generated 8.3 euros of gross value added benefit to the Britain's economy. So for every dollar spent, they're effectively bringing in $8 worth of revenue for the area. It led to a total of 7.7 billion euros in gross value added being generated by the film incentives just in 2019, right? Now, those seems like they're investing even more now. So these tax incentives are working. The other stat that they had here is in 2019, this spending created 49,845 jobs in London and 19,000 plus throughout the rest of Britain. Universal alone spent 37.5 million euros on the staff behind just those two movies. So those tax incentives are directly translating to revenue for the economy. They're translating to jobs and hardworking people that are then able to also spend money within the economy. These tax incentives work. And unless we get some form of additional tax incentive in California, the bad news is that this whole trend is very likely to continue. It's heartbreaking, but that is our deep dive into what's making waves this week.